The world changed in August 1945. The atomic bomb fell upon Hiroshima, then Nagasaki, and history split in two. Germany was already gone, its leader dead, its empire in ashes. Yet, in the Allied camps, the news arrived like thunder from another world. Soldiers who had served the Reich looked up from their bowls of soup in disbelief. They asked questions no one could answer. How could a single weapon destroy an entire city? Hitler's generals, men who once dreamed of wonder weapons, sat in silence. They had built rockets and tanks, but nothing like this. The true decisive weapon had come too late for them, and they knew it. Some whispered that had Germany lasted another year, the world might have looked very different. But deep down, they felt something unfamiliar, relief that the bomb was not Hitler's to use. In places like Trent Park and Dustbin, where captured officers were held, the news was met with disbelief. Some thought it was Allied propaganda, a trick to humiliate them. Others leaned forward, listening closely, the words atomic bomb echoing through the barracks. Guards said they could see fear return to men who had faced death without blinking. The war had ended, yet a new terror had begun. When the reports were confirmed, the silence deepened. Kesselring, Jodl, and others whispered among themselves. No fortress was safe, no army invincible. The balance of power had changed overnight, and they were witnesses to the end of their own military age. Some even began to debate whether war itself could continue to exist in this new world. Their pride in warfare had turned to confusion and awe. General Wilhelm Keitel muttered, "Had we possessed such a weapon, London would have vanished overnight." His words hung heavy, a glimpse into the Reich's cold ambition. They had always dreamed of annihilation as strategy. The concept of restraint had never existed in Hitler's mind or his command. For him, the atomic bomb would have been the final proof of destiny. Around him, officers nodded with grim fascination. Einstein and Fermi's names were spoken with envy and regret. They cursed the scientists who fled Germany, and for the first time, the generals saw how their arrogance had cost them the future. One even said that the Jews we despised built the weapon we desired. It was a moment of dark realization. Knowledge had conquered hate. Germany had once imagined itself leading the atomic race, but in truth, it was never close. Heisenberg's teams lacked funding, unity, and direction. The scientists argued while the Allies built cities of research under the Manhattan Project. Even uranium supplies were scarce, scattered, and misused. Nazi bureaucracy had strangled its own innovation. The generals learned this only after capture. They realized their nation's super science had been an illusion. America's bomb had proven that true power lay not in myth, but in coordination and reason, a concept alien to Nazi war planning. They recalled Hitler's impatience with theory and long-term research. Now, that impatience had doomed them. The future had belonged not to the fanatics, but to the thinkers. At the Nuremberg trials, some generals reflected on the meaning of the bomb. Von Rundstedt called it the door to mankind's destruction. They spoke of peace with a tremor in their voices, as if realizing the limits of their own creations. For once, their tone carried no pride, only fear. They had seen cities burn, but never disappear in an instant. Others, like Guderian, argued it might end total war forever. It was a strange irony, men who had invented blitzkrieg now praying that no one would ever wage such war again. Reporters noted their distant stares whenever atomic news was mentioned. The bomb had made even the architects of destruction question humanity itself. For them, it was both a mirror and a warning. At Trent Park, hidden microphones recorded their private thoughts. The generals argued over who to blame, Hitler for chasing rockets or their scientists for failure. Some laughed bitterly, others fell into silence. One remarked that the Americans must have stolen God's secret. Their disbelief became fascination, and fascination turned to fear. To them, the Americans had achieved the impossible. The bomb was a triumph of intellect over ideology. British intelligence listened from behind the walls, noting every word. The defeated now analyzed the new masters of war. These tapes, declassified decades later, revealed that even in defeat, the generals still measured power by destruction. They had not yet learned the lesson history offered. By 1944, Hitler's faith lay in rockets and revenge. He saw victory in myth and refused the practical science that could have changed the war. His generals later confessed they had followed a dreamer. Into ruin, the V-2 rockets had terrorized London, but changed nothing of the outcome. The atomic bomb would have done what Hitler only imagined. While the Allies built reactors, the Reich built fantasies. The atomic age dawned without them. And so, when Hiroshima fell, the generals understood that Hitler's wonder weapons had been nothing more than toys beside the real power of the atom. One officer remarked, "We chased ghosts while they chased the future." It was the ultimate indictment of Nazi delusion. After the war, blame found a new target: Werner Heisenberg. Some generals claimed he had betrayed Germany by slowing the project on purpose. Others said he had simply failed under pressure. His name became the symbol of a broken scientific dream. Could he have built the bomb if given full freedom? Historians still argue. To the Allies, his restraint was almost heroic. To the generals, it was humiliation. They realized that their ignorance of science had left them powerless before the logic of the atom. The battlefield had moved to the laboratory, and for the first time, they understood that brains could command more power than armies. The modern warlord was now the scientist. At Farm Hall, when Otto Hahn heard of Hiroshima, he whispered, "My God, we didn't do it, they did." The room fell silent. German science, once the pride of Europe, had lost its soul to politics and fear. Hahn wept for what had been possible and what had been prevented. Their discovery of fission had birthed a weapon they never built. The generals later heard of their scientists' reactions with mixed feelings. Relief that Hitler never had such power. Shame that Germany had failed to reach it first. Pride and terror had finally merged into one emotion: defeat. The Farm Hall transcripts would later reveal that these men, once celebrated in the Reich, now stood at the edge of a moral abyss. For years, German officers mocked Americans as soft and naive. But after Hiroshima, their tone changed. "They have surpassed us in both science and spirit," one colonel admitted quietly. They saw how the United States had united its minds, its money, and its morality behind one colossal purpose. It was something the Reich could never have achieved. The bomb became a symbol of American ascendancy. It was proof that democracy could harness intellect as power. The generals saw the torch of dominance pass across the ocean, and in their silence lay reluctant admiration. America's victory was not just military, it was intellectual, and that, perhaps, stung the most. In their cells, some generals predicted what would come next. "Now Stalin will want his own bomb." One said, they were right. The Cold War was already being born in whispers, even behind bars. The Germans sensed the next conflict forming: a war of ideas, not trenches. The world they had destroyed was being rebuilt on fear. The bomb had split humanity into two empires: American and Soviet Germany. Once the center of Europe was now only the scar dividing them. They understood too late that they had given birth to a world of permanent suspicion. The art of war had changed forever. The generals who once unleashed blitzkrieg now saw it rendered obsolete. A single bomb could do what a million men could not. The logic of tanks and trenches had been replaced by the logic of fear. Victory now meant survival. They realized future wars would not be fought for conquest, but for deterrence. Power no longer required armies, it required threat. Deterrence became the new battlefield. In that moment, they understood that their legacy was dead. The future belonged to the shadow of the atom. For the first time, some generals spoke of guilt. "Perhaps it is God's punishment for us." One whispered, "The ruins of Hiroshima look too much like Berlin." The destruction they once commanded now stared back at them through a different lens: universal, inescapable. They began to see war not as glory, but as curse. The bomb reflected their own sins, magnified to a global scale. What they had begun in arrogance had ended in annihilation. A few prayed that mankind would never again unleash such power. Others simply stared at the ground, knowing it already would. From their prison cells came memoirs, confessions, and warnings. The generals who once served tyranny now wrote of peace. They feared what would happen when every nation sought the same weapon. Some even said that the atomic bomb had finally made all humans equally fragile. They saw clearly what they could not see before: that power without conscience leads only to ashes. The bomb had not saved humanity. It had enslaved it to fear. They hoped that future leaders would remember the cost of unchecked ambition. History would prove that hope fragile, but not forgotten. As 1945 turned into 1946, the world held its breath. The age of steel had become the age of fire. Hitler's generals, once masters of war, were now relics in an atomic dawn. They spoke of the end of history and the beginning of something new, an era where fear would keep. The peace. They had lost not just the war, but the meaning of power itself. Science, not ideology, had won. The world no longer needed conquerors, it needed caution. And from that victory came the most terrifying peace mankind had ever known. The bomb was no longer a weapon. It was a shadow on the human soul.